as we have been doing on numerous occasions in recent days because of something we didn't know anything about 6 days ago that has nevertheless become the biggest story in the NFL, the Deshaun Watson saga. We now have 13 lawsuits that have been filed against the Texans quarterback for allegations of misconduct occurring during massages. 13, with 9 at least more under consideration based upon what attorney Tony Buzbee had to say at a press conference on Friday. Now, I've been candid about my concerns regarding the way that Buzbee is handling himself. That's my opinion. Doesn't change the fact that these individuals may have claims that have merit, and ultimately, any of them, some of them, all of them, Charean, may be able to prove in a court of law, either in civil court or criminal court, that there was misconduct on the part of Deshaun Watson, regardless of anything that Tony Buzbee has said or done. And Sims and I were talking about this today. With each passing allegation, it becomes harder and harder to come to the conclusion that this is all one big misunderstanding or fabrication or embellishment with that many people involved. The more people involved, the harder it is to maintain a conspiracy like this and make it something where everyone is lying about Deshaun Watson. So he has rights, they have rights, it all goes forward. And with each additional case, it gets more complicated, Charean, and it has to be more concerning for the folks at the league office.
Well, and you know what else makes it harder, Mike, with each passing case is to make them go away, right? Because you're not just talking about one agreement or two agreements. Now we're talking 13 agreements with possibly more to come. I've had trouble the last 2 weeks keeping up with two things. One is the number of free agents and trades that the Texans have made since free agency began. And the other is these cases against Deshaun Watson. Literally, you can't keep up before another one is filed. We were at 12 just, a couple hours ago. I look up and a 13th had been filed. So they just keep coming. My question is this, Mike. I've been around a lot of NFL players. I've talked to a lot of NFL players. They all get massages, and most of them get daily massages. This is not unusual, okay? This usually happens. But I've never had a player tell me that they have more than one masseuse. They use one masseuse all the time. It's a regular part of the routine at the same time, off season, in season, whatever. They do it at the same time with the same person in the same place. And many times it's a male masseuse. And I had not even considered that until these cases started coming. So I guess my big question would be, why so many? And I know that I read where it possibly because of COVID was using insulin. That doesn't even make any sense to me. To me, you have one masseuse who's going to be with you at all times, Mike, if you're an NFL player and can afford to do this.
Yeah, especially if there's some sort of an excuse premised on the pandemic, that would be all the more reason to not have a revolving door of massage therapists. And that was based on a report that emerged from TMZ over the weekend. I don't know who leaked that. I don't know if this was part of the broader PR strategy for Deshaun Watson to get TMZ on his side by giving them some sort of a nugget, but that didn't move the needle in his direction. The reaction that I saw to that was, so what? And it's kind of nonsensical that the pandemic is being cited as an excuse for having a different massage therapist apparently every single day. And if look, what I said this today, regardless of my concerns about Tony Buzbee and some disingenuous comments he's made about not knowing Hal or Cal or whatever his name is. That was his comment from Friday about not knowing Cal McNair, which we both agree, Charean, was a little ludicrous, to it not being about the money when it's clearly about the money. The whole system is premised on the money. Regardless of any of that, he's winning in the court of public opinion because he's unchallenged. Yes. At some point, you have to have something more than the tweet that Deshaun Watson posted last Tuesday night that for most people made them aware of the problem in the first place. There has to be something more than that if you have something that is a persuasive and compelling defense. And the longer the time goes by, it doesn't matter what happens in court with any of these cases. You've got it locked in to the minds of the people out there who are hearing these things that this guy is at fault. Nothing prevents the average person from coming to their own conclusion as to whether or not they think he's at fault. They're never going to be privy to all the facts of what happened. They're going to make their own conclusion. And the average person who's been paying attention to this and is hearing this is far more likely to conclude he's in the wrong than he's in the right because his side's done nothing to shine a light on whatever his explanation would be other than this report from over the weekend from TMZ. So Rusty Hardin better get his butt to work if he wants to try to turn this around in the court of public opinion, Charean.
Yeah, Mike, I think he's already lost the PR battle. This has gone far too long before his side has said anything, and we're still missing that. And with these cases building, at some point, the NFL, right, they care about PR. This looks worse and worse and worse by the day. And at some point, the NFL is going to step in and say, all right, we're putting you on the commissioner's exempt list or whatever they're going to do. I realize it's the offseason, but from a PR standpoint, the NFL's losing in this battle. The Houston Texans are losing in this battle. And Deshaun Watson certainly is losing in this battle. Look, Rusty Hardin is fantastic. He's had Adrian Peterson. He's had Roger Clemens. He's had a ton of guys. Well, he's had a ton of guys that he's gotten out of bad situations.
He got Roger Clemens into a bad situation. I don't want to relitigate something from more than 10 years ago, but the defamation lawsuit that Roger Clemens filed against his former trainer created a bad kind of jackpot for Roger Clemens. Other than that, I have no concerns about Rusty Hardin, but his record is not unblemished in high-profile cases. Let me just interject that.
Okay. Most cases, he's handled a lot of these cases. Let's put it that way, Mike. He's handled a lot of these cases. He is familiar with the situation that Deshaun Watson is in at this point, and he knows how to get him out of that, but I don't know what their side is doing at this point. I don't know when Deshaun Watson hired him, how this has gone since then, but it's just getting worse by the day for Deshaun Watson.
And Charean, at some point, you got to write the check to some sort of a PR firm, some sort of a crisis management firm. And this is where the Texans become relevant, not for what they may have done that would amount to collusion with Tony Busby. And I explained today the collusion could be as simple as Tony Busby giving them a heads up and making sure they're okay with him proceeding with these matters. And the Texans saying, sure, go for it. He's been a pain in our butt. We don't care. We're not going to help him. Beyond what they did or didn't do in any communications they may have had with Busby, the question is, what are they doing to work directly with Deshaun Watson? And is he accepting any of that? Now, their PR function, I don't even know who's in charge given the termination of Amy Palchik during the season, but there is no discernible PR effort on Deshaun Watson's behalf. And I don't know that that's Rusty Hardin's bailiwick anyway. He's a lawyer. Now, there's a certain amount of PR that every lawyer does, but at a certain point, you need a skilled professional who can handle something like this and come up with a strategy aimed at pushing back against the stuff that Tony Busby has done to make the average person who's been paying attention to this likely to think something bad is going on here. That's a problem. And with each passing minute, it's getting worse, not better for Deshaun Watson. And I don't know whether or not, Charean, they think they've got some silver bullet that's going to turn this thing around. But with 13 cases filed, it would have to be one gigantic silver bullet to turn this thing around.
Yeah, it'd have to be video or something, right? Maybe they need to contact Tony Busby about PR, Mike, because he's won this court of appeals right here in public court, because he's been terrific at the PR. And like you said, we can argue about the way he's handled this, but he's come out and he's talked and he's tweeted and he's done all those things so that the public is seeing his side and his client's side, not the other side. And if they have something, they need to come out and say what they have and how they think this thing will go away. He didn't do it. Whatever it is that they have, that silver bullet, they need to do it and do it soon, Mike.
Here's the other thing that strikes me as odd from the perspective of someone who practiced law. And whenever there is a company or an individual who allegedly has engaged in misconduct and wrongdoing, the other lawyers in the community don't stand down and let one lawyer handle all the cases. They start to get involved. They start to investigate claims. They start to solicit claims in ways that are permissible under the rules of attorney professional conduct or that aren't permissible, as the case may be. That's one thing that is odd to me here, Charean. The legal profession, the civil law practice is for profit, and it's premised on finding good cases against people who have money and representing those individuals, because there's three legs on the stool, as they explained it to me in law school: liability, damages, and someone who can pay. And if you're missing one of the three, you're wasting your time. When you have someone who has resources, when you have someone who has engaged in apparent misconduct, when you have someone whose misconduct would be sufficiently shocking if proven to result in a significant award for mental anguish and other related damages, there should be more attorneys than Tony Buzbee swarming around this case. That's what is kind of strange to me. With each additional case, why is it only him? There are surely other attorneys in Houston who represent individuals in cases like this. Where are they? Because it is highly competitive, highly competitive. And as I said on Friday when I was expressing my opinions about Tony Buzbee's handling of this, at some point it is in the best interest of one or more of the individuals to have someone else handling these cases, because Buzbee becomes too much the centerpiece, the focus of the litigation. But you know what, Charean, at this point with 13 and counting, I don't even think it matters anymore. The raw numbers are at the point where that is the story. There are too many for the average person of reasonable mind to look at this and not say something stinks here. And the chances of the thing stinking being on the plaintiff's side of the ledger are getting smaller and smaller all the time.
Mike, you've been on both sides of this. You've obviously been in law, and you obviously know PR really, really well. If you're Rusty Hardin, how do you advise your client at this point? What do you tell him to say, or what do you come out and say?
I tell him you should have settled the first case when you had the chance. That's what I tell him, because that's what should have happened. See, you need to be sure you've got somebody who will take the advice you give. And one of my concerns is that perhaps Deshaun Watson has been getting advice that he's been refusing to take. I wouldn't work with a client. I don't care how much they're paying me by the hour. I wouldn't work with a client who doesn't listen to me. My life's hard enough without my clients who aren't listening to me. At this point, though, I would want to get in a room with Deshaun Watson. I possibly would want to do a lie detector test. I'd want to know for myself, is he guilty of this or not? And if he's guilty, it goes one way. If he's not, it goes another way. And even though polygraph machines aren't admissible in a court of law, they get used all the time for all sorts of other things. And before I would spend my time and put my reputation to a potential predator, I want to know damn well that the person that I'm representing is innocent. So I would consider having him submit to a polygraph. If he doesn't do it, find another lawyer. If he submits and he passes, then we're going to come up with a strategy that is premised on trying to prove that each and every one of these cases is incorrect, is mistaken, is whatever, would be consistent with him passing a polygraph test. That's how bad it is at this point. That's what I would personally do. And what that means is I probably would end up not taking the case, because Deshaun Watson would justifiably be indignant at my request. But I need to know that I can believe the person who's accused of so many instances of misconduct before I can go forward representing his or her interests to the best of my ability. So I think that's what I would do.
You know, we started off this whole offseason with Deshaun Watson wants to be traded. He has a no trade clause. He'll get to dictate where he goes. That's out the window too now, Mike. If he gets traded, I don't know that he's going to have a say in this. You know, if it eventually happens, and I think personally it's going to be paused for now, because an NFL team wanting to trade for Deshaun Watson is going to want to know, what is the NFL going to do? Is he guilty of these? There are a lot of questions in this that you want answered before you commit to what you're going to have to commit to get Deshaun Watson. Now, you can try to get a lowball offer, but if you're the Texans, you're not accepting that at this point. You're waiting this out to see what happens long term to go get him. But there may only be, in the end, I know what we read over, there's still 5 teams that have interest in Deshaun Watson, whatever, or 6. But I just think his options may be limited at this point. It may be 1 or 2 teams, and he may have to accept that, Mike, if he eventually wants to be traded. And I do think the Texans want to trade him now. It's just a question of, when is that going to happen? How is this thing going to play out?
Charean, I think the analysis for the Texans at some point will be, we can't trade him. Do we run the risk of keeping him on the roster and having him land on the commissioner exempt list for all of the 2021 season, and in turn having to pay his full $10+ million salary. The great irony of all this, in less than 3 months, it may have shifted from Watson wanting nothing to do with the Texans to the Texans wanting nothing to do with him, because if he shows up and if he's put on the commissioner exempt list, and that's the device that's available, wide discretion for the commissioner, PR driven. If the kitchen gets too hot, we got to get the player out of it. We got to get the player off the field. We can't have the player in our games being the subject of the perfunctory mention that he's facing 13 sexual assault lawsuits, and who knows what the number would be by the time September rolls around. So the Texans' analysis soon may be, do we cut this guy to avoid having to pay him $10 million if he's on the commissioner exempt list for all of the 2021 season? That's a judgment call that somebody in Texas is going to have to make. And that I think is coming. That question is coming. It's going to be relevant for the Texans sooner rather than later. And I don't think anybody's going to trade for him for now, because you'd have to.
Agreed.
Frankly, if I'm going to trade for him, I want the polygraph. It's probably not legal. It's probably, I remember, I think Mike Shanahan used a polygraph allegedly at one point, and I researched it under the CBA, and it wasn't permissible. But I think that's the only way I'd be comfortable doing business with Deshaun Watson at this point. The only way that I would know is if I know he can pass a polygraph and tell me that he didn't do these things that he's accused of. Otherwise, he's radioactive as far as I'm concerned at this point. The cloud is too thick right now over Deshaun Watson.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.